Alright, how's it going, crew? Welcome back to another episode of the Captain Reacts. Today we'll be reacting to YouTube's Darkest Channels number 4 by Nick Crowley. Now before we get to this video, let me just go through my spiel. If you enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe to get up to date with more episodes of this when I release them. As well as let me know down in the comments below any other videos I should react to, because these reaction videos are my best performing videos at the moment. I do consider myself more of a gaming channel and stuff, but these reaction videos do perform the best. Anyway, YouTube's Darkest Channels number 4 by Nick Crowley. Be sure to visit his channel as well. I'll leave it in the description, and leave a like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Anyway, let's get into it.
January 3rd, 2021. Installment number 3 of YouTube's Darkest Channels is released.
I legit am scared.
The episode showcased multiple disturbing accounts, with one in particular being Leather Smoke Me, an account run by a man who, along with his fans, fetishized his own deterioration and subsequent death due to smoking.
Okay. I actually don't think I watched the third one. Seeing that.
Before this video aired, I would briefly explore the entirety of this smoking fetish community, discovering a countless number of these channels participating in it, with one of which being run by a 19-year-old high school student named Dylan Pinder, by far the youngest person I had ever seen taking part in this. I would only watch one of his videos in passing, using that along with many others as evidence that this trend did in fact exist. However, at the time, I could have never known how twisted that obscure channel truly was, and how much darker it would get, as just a few months later, Dylan's life would take a disturbing turn, and one that would forever immortalize his channel as one of YouTube's darkest. Before we get too far into this, I want to thank today's sponsor, Raycon.
We are not sponsored, unfortunately.
Addicted to dying slower. This was the caption for Dylan Pinder's first video on Instagram, as he's shown taking a long drag of his cigarette. And looking back, it was this account that provides the context needed to understand Dylan, as well as his YouTube channels.
Question,
videos
is this
like this were the basis of his content, and those watching
is it a
absolutely
smoke thing,
loved it.
or is it just...
Commenters would say things like, "Looking good, man. You're so sexy, addicted lung... Your face is cute," and "Very hot smoker, smoker fetish?" He would never respond to that final question, though the answer wasn't hard to find.
What?
Dylan would post these videos shirtless, while
how do you find the
acknowledging
act
and
of
thanking
smoking
the fans
itself
who were
hot?
leaving sexual comments, even mentioning a potential start of an OnlyFans account. He knew what he was doing, and his account was a fetish page through and through, but not in the way that you would typically expect. Dylan clearly loved smoking, but more specifically the dark side effects that came with it, as he would hashtag things like cancer and lung, as well as even stating outright that he thought cancer was good. And he was being serious too, as he'd even take pictures of the warning labels on cigarette packages, which featured photos of withering and dying individuals, as they were designed to scare people away. But rather than deterring him, Dylan would openly say how much he loved the sight of them, as it showed what could happen to him someday. And
So, smoking fetishes are people who fetishize the act and negative side effects of smoking? That's just fucked up in so many different ways already.
Idea that Dylan absolutely loved. Dylan Pinder wanted to get cancer and die before his audience's eyes, much like Leather Smoke Me had done years before, along with many others across the web, with his Instagram providing all the context we need, context that would make his YouTube channels all the more concerning. Dylan had 3 channels, one of which going under the same name as his Instagram, along with another called Jericho Chris, the same account that I had found way back when researching in December. And both accounts consisted mainly of his smoking videos, And quickly, Dylan would start to amass a few hundred views per video, as viewers were watching eagerly to see the young man begin to wither. It's a concept that's dark enough, especially considering his age. But as mentioned, Dylan had 3 total channels, with his third proving to be
Why?
the darkest. The channel would go by the name of Juniper Crossing, and again feature more smoking clips. Only,
Why would people
unlike his other
fetishize
pages,
the negative
these
side effects
clips
of
didn't make
smoking?
up the majority of his content. In fact, the channel itself was dedicated to a whole other rabbit hole here on YouTube. And it's one that we've been down before.
Hmm?
See what I'm talking about? That is true power and true free will. Basically, we're all trapped on an iron grid. Our cells are literally keeping us trapped on planet Earth. You need to get to the center of the flat Earth before you're dead, or you will expire of your own stupidity.
Blood Over Intent, Proof of Life, Quasi-Luminous. This was the title of Dylan's second upload to the Juniper Crossing channel that would go live back in December of 2021,
drawing in
clearly
blood
in reference
now.
to what has now become one of the largest and most intriguing rabbit holes on all of YouTube. We explored the mystery way back in the day, the Cult of Saturn. It's a group that believes an apocalyptic event is imminent, and the only way to survive is to put your name in Satan's Book of Life, a book reserved for the first 144,000 people who partake in a ritual known as Blood Over Intent. For the ritual, you write your intentions down on a sheet of paper and then spill your blood over it, which supposedly manifests your intentions, as well as puts your name in the Book of Life, essentially securing your salvation. But in order for it to fully work, you must record the ritual and post it here on YouTube. It's one of the first big rabbit holes that we explored on the channel, and it was uncovered that the man behind the whole movement is named Mark Braun, or as he goes by on YouTube, Quasi-Luminous, which Dylan references in the title of his video. Mark believes that
kinda
he
fucked.
is Satan himself, and the followers of this movement believe the same, despite the fact that in reality he's just a genuinely disturbed guy. Now, fellow YouTuber Blame It On Jorge has, in my opinion, the best breakdown of this mystery, so I recommend watching his video on it for further details. But all in all, it's an incredibly twisted community.
Yeah, that's kinda
something that
fucked.
became even more apparent to me, as every now and then I still receive bizarre
Don't join
threats
cults,
from certain
kids.
members of the group,
Unless
despite
it's
having
mine.
posted that
I
video
don't have a cult,
over
but
a
if I
year
made
ago.
one, you better join it.
Nicholas
don't
Crowley,
join cults.
Nicholas Crowley. You were in the pocket of Fogget, we seen it. Nicholas Crowley. You were in the pocket of Fogget, we seen it. Nicholas Crowley.
But out of all the videos that I've seen associated with this group, Dylan's truly stand out. Most people who take part in this will simply prick their finger with a pushpin in order to spill their blood, but Dylan's approach is a little different and much more violent. Rather than gently jabbing himself with a pushpin, Dylan instead slams it into his finger over and over again, in most cases pushing the pin clear through his thumb, in one side and out the other. And though I can't fully show you an example of this,
I can
understand
imagine
the
it.
force he's
It's
using
fine. I don't
just
want to.
by listening.
Oh no.
There's a real darkness to this Juniper Crossing channel, as it's essentially the combination of 2 YouTube mysteries we've covered in the past, both of which being incredibly concerning in their own right. This is a channel run by a kid who wants to get cancer
He's
and
got some
die,
fucking
while
problems.
at the same time immersing himself into one of YouTube's darkest cults. And what's also obvious when watching these videos is there's a real anger to Dylan, which is fully on display when he jams the pin through his fingers, as well as on his Instagram page. We can see that his bedroom walls are filled with holes, likely as a result of Dylan punching them. He was clearly dealing with some very serious issues in regards
he's
to
got
his
some
mental
problems.
health, and unfortunately, things would only escalate from this point on.
They go further?
From here, he'd begin to fall down into a conspiracy rabbit hole, posting about the Earth being flat, stating that humans are being farmed, and that our world is just one big prison. theories that he would begin to push more and more on his channel as time went on, further showcasing what appeared to be the deterioration of Dylan's mind, in posts that would all lead us to his final upload, a video that will forever prove to be the darkest he'd ever make. On the morning of March 15th, 2021, Dylan would post a video titled "Smoking in a Car Full Vid." It would feature no further description. The clip shows as Dylan jokes around with his father on their way to Dylan's school as he enjoys his early morning cigarette, which in his words was the best way to start the day. He then asks his dad if they could visit his nana after school, and the two would start to plan out their day.
Are we going to Nana's place after? Are we supposed to? Maybe. You want to go there for a visit? Yeah.
Dylan then finishes his cigarette before shutting off the camera. He would never post again.
How
Not
is that
just
the
on his
most
YouTube
disturbing
account,
video,
but
though?
on his Instagram as well. In fact, no social media belonging to Dylan would ever be updated from this moment on. The video would go live as soon as Dylan would get dropped off at school, and from there he would start his day as usual. That morning he would sit in his classroom at Christ the King High School, the same way he would do any other school day.
19
Only
and
today
so on,
was
high school,
different.
yeah.
For reasons unknown, at roughly 9:30 a.m., Dylan would stand up from his chair before pulling a knife out of his backpack, right in the middle of class. He would then proceed to turn to the girl sitting next to him, and before anyone could realize what was happening, Dylan would stab 17-year-old Jennifer Winkler and quickly leave the classroom and the school
fuck.
itself. It happened too quickly to react, and in an instant, Jennifer would be fatally injured, later passing away in the hospital before her father could say goodbye. Dylan would attempt to
That's
run, but would only make it
fucked.
to a nearby neighborhood before being caught and arrested for murder. Just barely a few hours ago, Dylan was sitting with his dad planning out his day, and there was no sort of indication in this final video that just moments later he would take a life in cold blood. And even more shocking of all, according to the victim's father, there was seemingly no bad blood between the two. As a matter of fact, they were at one point neighbors, though they never really hung out or talked. The attack was completely unprovoked and seemingly without reason. According to Dylan's own dad, he was a troubled kid who struggled daily with mental health issues. But in his own words, he said he believed that Dylan was making strides and starting to get better. But his YouTube channel paints a different story. It showed a young man who had seemingly no will to live, a man that wanted to die, and a young man who was clearly dealing with intense and very concerning anger issues, all leading to him cutting short a life for seemingly no reason at all. And just based off of the way that Jennifer's dad describes her, well, it seems like our world lost an amazing person that day.
She was bright, smart, creative. She was just Jenny. I'm gonna miss her, and
A few days following the murder, I would receive an email from one of my viewers letting me know what had happened, which in part revealed the true scope of Dylan's channels and just how quickly things had turned for the worst from that fateful day that I had viewed his video. But most disturbingly of all, at that point, there were still people leaving comments from the Blood Over Intent group, literally saying that they praised Dylan, despite the fact that he was a known murderer at this point, something that if you were in his comment sections, you couldn't miss. The Juniper Crossing channel stands today as a dark look into the mind of a truly disturbed individual, someone who dedicated his life to a satanic cult, someone who wanted the world to see him slowly die on his channel, and someone who would mercilessly kill not even 2 hours after posting his final video. And unfortunately, the signs were there all along. But this isn't always the norm. In fact, typically just the opposite rings true, as people
So, God, that fucking thing. Nothing against people who truly have issues, but that kid really had fucking issues. It's people like that that need to see somebody, talk to somebody, and get some help. Because good fucking lord, that Yeah, that channel really was a downward spiral. Starting with the basic fetishizing the negative effects of smoking to joining, I guess, a fucking YouTube Satan cult to straight up fucking murder at 19 years old, still in high school. God, that's fucking. Man, just the sound. Oh, the whole thumb pricking thing was. Oh my god. Alright. Jesus.
People will hide behind their YouTube personalities, leaving behind no indication of the true evil that they possess. And in the case of Kadence Pinder, this rings especially true. It was a channel that began back in 2014, though remnants of that time have long since been removed, as both Kadence and her channel would go through a massive change in 2017. That year, Kadence would transition genders from male to female, having undergone surgery and procedures to become the person that she always felt she was. It was an isolating time for her, and rather than going through the struggles alone, she would instead decide to dedicate her channel to this journey. With that, the page was completely wiped, and Kadence would start from scratch, bringing her viewers into her life and her experiences as a transgender woman, a move that would immediately pay off. Her channel began to grow, amassing a few thousand subscribers, and her videos would gain hundreds of thousands of views in just 1 year of posting. And following this trajectory, her numbers were poised to continue growing. But this change in content wasn't just paying off in terms of numbers. Over that time, her comment sections would be filled with positive messages from people who had been genuinely helped by Kadence, as they too were transitioning and dealing with similar struggles of their own. Cadence's content was quite literally making people feel less lonely at a time in their lives that can
that
be
sounds pretty
notoriously
good, but where's the
isolating.
dark twist?
And though her following was far from huge, the impact that she was making on the world and in the lives of her viewers certainly was. And one could imagine that a few more successful years of posting, and who knows, maybe Kadence could have truly made a living off of YouTube. This is just something that we'll never know. As
Where
instead,
does it go wrong?
by the beginning of 2018, her posting would slow to a halt, leaving the channel to go dormant to this day. Now, typically throughout the series, when a channel abruptly stops posting, it's normally a sign that something tragic had happened. But in this case, the circumstances were a bit different, as Kadence would actually continue updating her other social media profiles, even after abandoning the channel. There, she would post about how burnt out she had become and the lack of motivation that she possessed for making videos. And it
I
seems she
feel
would
that.
never get this motivation back, as despite the hot start, the channel was still a long ways away from paying her bills, and being in her mid-20s at the
Okay, before we hear where this takes a dark turn, I completely understand the whole lacking motivation to, because to be successful at making videos and streaming is like a dream come true. But at the same time, you just get to a point where you just feel like you need a break. And if you don't come back from that break, you have to force yourself to come back from that break. And that can be hard. Because grinding it out and doing this daily can start to feel like a job. And a job where you are your own boss, it can be hard to make yourself do the work. Don't get me wrong, I still love doing this and I enjoy it. Me personally, my struggle is finding the content to make and getting people to come around and to interact with. Anyway, let's get back to
the
this.
time, she needed to find a
Saying I
reliable
understand the
income
whole
elsewhere, and it was around this time that
hard
she
to
would receive the perfect
lack
offer.
of motivation.
At the time, Kadence was dating her longtime boyfriend Marcus Strabel, whose mother owned a daycare service that she ran from home. And looking to expand, his mother would offer the couple a job in which they could operate their own daycare service right from their home. For the couple, the opportunity was a no-brainer, as they both loved kids, and the job would allow them to work even without leaving their home.
Kids are involved.
By
That is awful.
2018, Kadence
Where
would
is this
leave
going?
YouTube behind to pursue this new venture full-time. A move that at first proved to be the right decision, as she enjoyed her career and could now financially sustain herself. But very quickly, things would take a turn for the worst. Not long into the daycare's operation, the Division of Child and Family Services would quietly launch an investigation into the daycare, and more specifically, into Kadence Pinder. The exact details of this event are still to this day unknown, but we do know why they were alerted in the first place, with the reason being that Kadence had been accused of performing a hands-on sexual offense to a child.
Whoa.
Something that supposedly happened when she was watching the children within her own home. It's a horrifying statement to read, but ultimately it proved to be short-lived, as the case was quickly dropped, essentially declaring Kadence as innocent, allowing her to continue her job as an at-home daycare worker. And subsequently, the information within the case would never be released, not even to the parents who were trusting this service. But either way, Kadence was technically found innocent, so perhaps it's unnecessary to even mention this.
Where is this going?
Well, maybe it would be, if not for the fact that during the same time, something else very dark was brewing behind the scenes. On December 2nd of 2019, the FBI would receive a tip that would come right from Google, who would notify them of suspicious activity coming from the account of Kadence Pinder. And it wouldn't stop there,
what
as
did
just
she
a week
do?
later, the FBI would yet again be notified, this time of even more suspicious activity that Google had noticed from that same account, with both alerts claiming that Kadence may have uploaded suspicious content to her account, with the content in question being CP. These tips would lead to the FBI opening an official investigation into Kadence, along with her boyfriend, as the two would share the account, though for a while nothing would come of it. In fact, it wouldn't be until November of 2020, nearly a full year later, that the FBI would visit the household of Kadence and Marcus. Once there, Kadence would claim that she had in fact seen CP just once or twice while scrolling around Tumblr, but that she had never actually downloaded anything, instead quickly clicking off in disgust. Marcus himself would echo a similar statement as well, claiming that if anything was downloaded, then it must have been an accident, and certainly nothing had been uploaded, even offering up his phone along with Kadence so that the FBI could confirm that there was nothing on their devices. However, their compliance didn't last long. Unsurprisingly, the FBI would accept their offer to search their phones, something that would immediately cause the couple to backtrack, as they refused to hand anything over, before asking the officers to leave their home. It was an undeniable red flag, and that alone told authorities all they needed to know, that both Kadence and Marcus had something worth hiding on their phones. But even this forethought couldn't prepare them for what they would find. After obtaining a warrant to search the phones of the couple, it would be revealed that the alert had in fact been correct, and Kadence's phone did hold multiple photos containing CP. But somehow it was even worse than you would imagine. Along with the straight-up CP was photographs depicting real-life physical abuse in some of the worst ways imaginable, all of which being done to children, and all of which found on the phone of a daycare worker. Having been caught red-handed, Kadence would state that it must have been a mistake, further claiming that she must have accidentally downloaded them from Tumblr, or it was Marcus who had done this all. Though
as
his
bad as
story was
Tumblr
much
can be,
different.
Tumblr
His
is
phone
not
also contained photographs depicting similar content, which he had admitted to downloading, only not alone. According to him, the couple would download these images together, admitting that they viewed them sexually and stored their favorites on separate accounts for later use. Though he was adamant about one thing, the fact that he had no idea that these kids were underaged. This, however, was a blatant lie. Upon reviewing the images, the FBI would conclude that the photographs could not have been mistaken for adults, as they didn't show teenagers or even preteens for that matter. Instead, the photos were of children as young as 3 years old,
Dude, what
the
the
same age as the
fuck?
kids that the two were watching over, alone within their home. And though the FBI had only received 2 alerts, the true scope was far worse than just a few photographs, as Kadence Pinder, the once budding YouTuber, had 125 pictures depicting CP all within her phone, far more than her boyfriend Marcus. The discovery has
Jesus.
led to Kadence being charged with 15 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, with Marcus being charged with 10 counts of the same. As of now, the two are both awaiting sentencing, but having them locked away is a huge relief, though I'm still left with many questions. That allegation of a sexual act performed on a minor by Kadence way back before she had gotten caught makes me wonder if there was any truth to that story, as she clearly was attracted to children, and she worked in close quarters alone with them, which also makes me wonder if the photos that she possessed were of kids that she was supposed to be watching. As remember, the Google alert was spurred on because Kadence had uploaded a photo, not just downloaded. So maybe that was a picture of one of the children that she was trusted to watch. But this is something that to this day hasn't been confirmed, and as of now
That's
it's
fucked.
believed that
That
at the
is.
very least, the majority of pictures that she had on her device were pulled right from
That is fucked. I mean, I've seen a Reddit Ask Me Anything where there was a guy who was a registered pedophile, but he had never done any kind of acts, nor was commonly looking up CP or anything like that. Who didn't ask me anything on Reddit. Essentially, he was saying, it's like a mental illness. You don't choose. Albeit he wasn't attracted to the kids that young, it was still bad, but his was more like 16-year-olds, which is still bad. But he pretty much said, it's a mental illness. Not everybody chooses it. And as long as people are actively trying to seek help for it and do not act on it at all, it's not nearly as bad. Which honestly, if you put it like that, if a person is actively seeking help for it, which is hard to do if it ever was to seriously be considered mental illness, because people immediately turn on you like that. But these people who have actually acted on it or frequently look at they are the worst, and that is fucked. Once you have acted on it, there is no redemption. You are fucked. Good lord, no.
Tumblr, which makes one of her final tweets all the more disturbing, as she says, "Wait, you can't upload to Tumblr anymore? I thought that's the only reason people even use Tumblr. Look at me learning something new every day." Kadence Pinder was, is, and will always be a disturbed individual. And scary enough, she had found herself in the perfect profession to objectify young children behind closed doors, a job that she was allowed to continue after one allegation, and nearly a year after Google had told the FBI that she had uploaded CP. And who knows what kind of sick things transpired within her home. But though the job she had found herself in was the perfect storm for a sick individual like Kadence, the profession that she had sought out initially wasn't much better, as she had actively tried for over a year to become a famous YouTuber, something that, had it happened, would have surrounded her with thousands of kids who looked up to her and would do anything
Yeah, there's
for
plenty.
her.
There.
I mean, we see it every day. Vile people using their status here to lure in kids. And as crazy as it may seem, I have to wonder if
I mean, of course, there's some big ones like EDP and stuff. I know I used to watch Mini Lad Craig Thompson before his allegations came out. There's some that I don't see as much of a big deal, like Call Me Carson. You can have your own thoughts and opinions on that, but yeah, there has been some serious issues with quite a few YouTube creators using their platform, and that is, oh my god.
that was a motivating factor for her starting to make content in the first place. But for our next creator, he never tried to hide the fact that he had a much darker career outside of YouTube. In fact, he practically put it on display for the world to see. The channel takes us to the Mexican state of Jalisco, the hometown of an up-and-coming rapper known as QBA. His real name was Christian Omar Palma Gutierrez, but most called him by his stage name, as his YouTube channel would go by QBA Official. And it was on this channel where he would begin to make a name for himself. Starting back in 2015, the young rapper would lean on the site to promote his music and share it across the world. And that's exactly what would happen. At the moment, he has songs across the site with over 10 million views. And on his own channel, he has multiple music videos that have amassed anywhere from 2 to 5 million views apiece. In Mexico, he was a full-blown star, as he'd rap about violence, gang activities, and drugs, something not too uncommon in that era of Mexican hip-hop. Though with these dark lyrics came a problem. YouTube would not monetize QBA's music, meaning that though he was getting millions of views, it said that at his peak, QBA was only making a mere $300 a month, nowhere near enough to bank on full-time. Making matters more difficult, the young rapper had recently gotten married and had a child, and with the wage he was making on YouTube, he knew that he would have to take on another job to help his family financially. So in 2018, he would begin a side gig as a car mechanic, working for around $80 to $100 a week. But as QBA struggled to pay his bills, a scandal had broken out in that same area where he lived. In February of 2018, 3 university students had gone out to film a school project, with a group settling on a somewhat remote region of Jalisco, QBA's home state. It was a trip that they would never return from, as they vanished into the night. The disappearance was shocking and especially concerning, as the 3 students were last seen being led to a vehicle by armed police officers, with the big issue being that there were no patrol cars in that area, and no cops either for that matter. Instead, the group had been kidnapped by fake officers and hadn't been seen since entering the vehicle. The case would gain national attention, as many assumed that the 3 had been killed, though no bodies had been discovered. In fact, no bodies would be discovered, or could be for that matter, and oddly enough, this was all thanks to QBA. When the rapper had taken up a job as a car mechanic, he would become close to his boss, a man named El Cochi, and seeing that the young man was struggling financially, he would offer him another job, one that would pay $160 a week, far more than he even made on YouTube, with the position being titled as a cook. But it's not the cook that you would normally expect, as instead, El Cochi had worked for the notorious Jalisco New Generation Cartel, a gang known as one of Mexico's most dangerous and violent, and the cooks were the low men on the totem pole, being practically relegated to dirty work and cleanup, Immediately after taking up the job, those 3 film students would go out to film on that fateful day, in which they had no idea that they were stepping on this gang's land, right in a location where the cartel was expecting another gang to show up. And thinking the students were with that gang, the Jalisco group would kidnap them, posing as police officers. Upon being kidnapped, the group would begin to torture them one by one as they desperately tried to
Oh,
get
God.
info on the gang that the 3 were working for, a gang that none of these students had any connection to, meaning that as they were being tortured for answers, they quite literally had nothing they could say. There was no information they could give, something that caused the violence to get so extreme that one student would ultimately be tortured to death. Realizing their mistake, the gang members would shoot the other 2 in cold blood to remove any possibility of this info getting out. The 3 film students had been murdered, and ultimately for no reason at all. It was at this moment that the gang would call upon QBA, the fresh new cook. He would be tasked with cleaning up the bodies of the 3 students in a way that would assure that they could never be found.
I don't want to visit
So
Mexico.
he one by one placed the bodies in large barrels and proceeded to fill them with acid. The acid would break down the chunks of flesh into a soup-like consistency, turning the kids into a substance that was completely unrecognizable to what they once were, before pouring the human soup down a storm drain, being rinsed away and never to be seen again. Following the completion of the job, QBA would continue rapping and posting his music onto YouTube, with these works being especially dark as he rapped about living life as a gang member. But before long, the channel would go silent, having had no uploads since, with the main reason being that QBA had been arrested. Unfortunately for him, QBA would be blown in for his role in the crime, essentially becoming the fall guy for the event, as he would eventually admit to having dissolved the bodies, as well as doing the same thing to even more victims, left behind from at least 3 separate hits. In aiding in the case against him, police would actually use snippets of the songs he'd post to YouTube as evidence on trial, as he often rapped about the gang activities as well as specific instances that authorities believe may have actually happened. His persona and his music were no act, and QBA had been rapping from experience. But QBA's channel...
Listen, guys. Being a thug is not cool. Being a gangster is not cool. This shit is not. I know it's my opinion, but this shit is not cool. This is fucking hell, man.
Isn't only dark because his lyrics allude to the lifestyle he was living, but also because, looking back on his situation, you can clearly see that his music was a call for help. In his songs, he would frequently talk about being trapped within the gang, calling it his own hell and implying that he wanted out, something that, upon agreeing to join, would never have been possible. His music was literally him admitting that something was wrong in his life and that he needed help, but to the millions who listened, they only thought it was art, making the channel tragic in its own way. And though this is where QBA's story ends, as he will now spend the rest of his life in prison, forever being known as a what-if in the world of hip-hop, the presence of gang and cartel violence is something that is still very apparent on the dark side of YouTube, and it has been for a very long time.
Yeah.
Most
that is-
famously, 17-year-old Juan Luis Leganes Rosales, who had become well known throughout the world of social media, and specifically on YouTube, before releasing a video where he would insult the leader of the very gang that QBA had worked for.
Don't fuck with
Move that didn't
cartels.
sit well. As a result, gang members would enter a bar in which the online star had been hanging out at, before opening fire, striking the teenager
Yeah.
as many as 18 times, killing him instantly. It was one of the more viral YouTube stories back in 2017,
Oh.
and tragically, it has since come out that Juan was incredibly impaired at the time of that notorious recording, and the video itself was taken by a friend who posted it to social media without his consent, a decision that would prove to be a tragic mistake.
Don't fuck with
But as dark as this story
cartels
is,
and
it's just
serious
another
gangs,
in a
man.
long
Just
line of
fuck.
examples. As fittingly, just a few
Don't
months
join
following this
them.
event,
Don't
yet
say
another
anything
YouTuber
about
will
them.
be targeted.
That shit is fucked.
El Salon TV was a Mexican YouTube channel started back on February 9th of 2012, being run by a lady named Pamika Montenegro. Pamika would feature videos ranging from beauty tips to skits as well as vlogs, with her undeniable charisma being present in each upload. But along with these fairly standard videos, Pamika would also focus a good deal of her content around political commentary in the region of Guerrero, Mexico. She was a journalist through and through, also publishing within her own magazine, as well as
journalist
across
in
vast
Mexico?
social media
That is
accounts.
a bad combo.
Politics were something that she took very seriously, though that might not always be obvious to outsiders who watched her videos, as she would take a very satirical approach to the topic, often playing as a character and cracking jokes, as she would share this very real information about local officials, having a specific interest in the corruption going on within the city of Acapulco. On March 3rd, 2016, Pamika would upload a video covering the supposed corruption of Evito Velázquez Iguari, an established politician in the area, stating that he had governed with, quote, compadres without experience and without social commitment, before going on to insinuate that he had multiple conflicts of interest and was clearly a corrupt man. Publishing this video would ultimately prove to be
Stupid
costly.
moves.
According to Pamika's husband, Samuel Munizori, immediately following its upload, his wife was met with a wave of harassment and death threats. A surprising reaction considering that Pamika had such a small following at the time, to this day having only garnered 2,000 subscribers, with the video itself having only 11,000 views. A number that's been heavily inflated
bad
in
as
recent years,
that stuff
likely
can-
having only
the
a
corruption
few
and all that
hundred
can
at the
be,
time of the threats.
It is
Yet
pretty
the
much
harassment for even
a death
talking about the
sentence to talk about
politician,
that shit.
even if no one was
From
listening,
how it sounds
was
down
very
there.
real. Leading her husband
I've never
to
been
state
in there,
that
I can't
whatever may
completely speak
happen
for
to
it,
him and
but
Pamika,
from
it will likely be at the
stories
hands
like
of
this.
Evadillo Velázquez. But truthfully, Pamika had made more enemies than just him. She had immense knowledge of the gangs that frequented that area, as well as a platform that she would often discuss the activities of these very groups, leading the rumor to be spread that she was releasing secret information about the gangs throughout her channel and her social media pages, something that obviously wasn't taken kindly to. And unfortunately, well, we know where this is headed. On February 5th, 2018, Pamika would be working at a restaurant that she had owned with her husband. There, her husband would send out a social media post inviting all their friends to come in for a visit. Immediately following this, 2 armed gunmen would enter the restaurant in which Pamika was working and proceed to execute her in front of her friends and loved ones. The men would quickly leave the restaurant, never being caught to this day. No motive has ever been given to the seemingly deliberate attack on Pamika, but diving into her history, it would quickly be reported that a local gang had taken her out due to the content she was posting on YouTube, with the Jalisco cartel being tossed around as a potential perpetrator for the crime, while others, including Pamika's own husband, thought that Evadillo Velázquez, the prominent politician that Pamika had frequently criticized, had likely put a hit on her, potentially reaching out to a local gang to do his dirty work in order to silence the journalist who had proven to be his biggest critic, with this particular theory being the most widely believed to this day. But whatever motive was
Journalism
and is true,
in most
it shows us
countries
the dangerous landscape that
don't
journalists
really
in
go
Mexico
too
are
well.
facing even to this day, and how risky this whole YouTube channel really was, despite appearing so innocent, and despite it being so innocent. As the
between
page was
places
run by
south
someone
of the
who
US,
simply had a passion for politics, and who wanted to report
some
on the
places
truth,
in the
despite
Middle
knowing
East
the
can be
implications that it could have.
a little
And
dangerous
unfortunately,
depending on
it
where
was this
exactly you
very
are, though
drive
that can be a
and the
little
love
more
she
specific
had
to
for
where
this
you are.
channel that would ultimately end up costing Pamika her life.
No, it can be pretty pretty bad in China.
You never know what you're gonna get when you explore these twisted channels that the site
Yeah.
has to offer. Some pages telegraph
Yeah.
devastation that's soon to come, while some come across as so inconspicuous. But regardless of how they gained their infamy, these channels will serve as relics on the site and tragic reminders of the disturbed side of humanity and the dark side of YouTube.
Yeah, no, that's...
I want to give a massive thank you to my gold tier patrons and my god tier.
Oh! So, if you have mental issues, get some help before things turn very fucked. Don't be a pedophile that actually acts on your shit because you're fucked. No redemption. Don't get involved in gangs or cartels. Do not commentate on large gangs and cartels from their area. All of those will essentially just lead to you're fucked. Yeah. Jesus. Anyway, that was YouTube's Darkest Channels number 4 by Nick Crowley. Be sure to visit his channel and subscribe. I'll leave a link down in my description below. As for all the people here, please, if you enjoy, leave a like and subscribe for more. Let me know. Kind of let me know that you guys are enjoying this, and let me know in the comments below any other videos you think I should react to. Anyways, guys, with that, I'll see you later, crew.